Hi everyone, welcome to the Job Truth panel. My name is Sith and I'm the Sponsorships Director at UTS Tech Society, and I'll be leading tonight's discussion. We'll be talking about all things cloud engineering and what it's like in the cloud industry. And now to our guest speakers. Today, we are joined by 4 professionals who all have experience in the cloud engineering field. If you would like to tell us your name, what your current role is, how you began your career, and where you studied, that would be amazing. Let's kick things off with Andrew from Amstelveen.
Hey guys, so my name's Andrew Mood. I'm from small consultancy. We're called Amstelveen. We do a lot of work in sort of cybersecurity and technology risk management space. So I guess I'm probably going to be a little bit different to the other panelists in that I'm probably more on the governance, risk and security side. We do a lot of work with clients on cloud computing implementations in particular. A lot of our clients are financial services, so there's probably some specific areas of there that's of interest that I imagine that we'll get to later in the session. My background is I studied Bachelor of IT at UTS, so that was back 10 years ago I graduated. Since then I've worked at Deloitte as a consultant, and then since then with Amstelveen for the last few years. Was that it? Was there something else you asked as well?
No, that's pretty much it.
Good.
Thank you,
Cool.
Andrew.
No worries.
Next, we have Alexander from Google.
Hi, everyone. My name's Alexander. I've been so I completed my degree in Bachelor of ICT in 2013. And from 2013, I've also been working full-time in IT-related jobs. I've had 4 titles in total. I'm currently a technical solutions engineer at Google, and I work primarily with our customers, our enterprise customers who use our products to conduct their business. I studied at University of Western Sydney, which is what it was called at the time. And then in between, I've had jobs such as a level 1 service desk. I've moved into a level 2 escalations and system administration position. I've also worked in the internal IT teams at Google to support Googlers conducting their job. And yeah, now my current position, which is definitely in cloud, which is to do with all things infrastructure, cloud technologies. And generally, I work in between customers who use our products, the engineers who actually develop the solutions, and also all of the tooling and documentation in between.
Cool. Thank you for that, Alexander. Next, we have Susanna from Atlassian.
Hi, everyone. I'm Susana Guillo. I work as an engineering manager in Atlassian as part of the cloud organization. I lead 3 teams in Jira Software Cloud, that is the Jira version for software teams. My day-to-day are plenty of cloud things, but in my career that started 20 years ago, I've been bouncing between different tech stacks. So learn a lot of things in the way, but more recent this experience we have in cloud in the last 5 years or so. I studied telecommunications engineer, the branch of computer science in Spain, around 22 years ago, more or less. And yeah, and since then, very passionate about software development and system design.
Cool. Thank you, Susanna. And finally, we have Kieran from IAG.
Yeah, Kieran Clulo from IAG. I'm the Director of Data Engineering and Architecture, and also other things that no one else wants to do. I'm probably the oldest person on the panel, but back in the dawn of time, I was originally a chemical engineer, and then through a bunch of very unlikely events, some may say unfortunate, ended up in software engineering. And that was really when the web and the internet was really taking off. And so I was just in at the right time. Worked in many places in the world, in UK and in America and Australia, for companies like Atlassian. Hi, Susanna, I used to work there. And TripAdvisor and various other companies, and now I'm at IAG.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. With that out of the way, we will now commence our panel. Let's start it off with some directed questions, and I'll be asking each of you to answer. Feel free to chime in and answer, even if it's a question that's not directed towards you. Just a reminder to our viewers, if you have any questions, remember to pop them in the chat and we'll answer them in the Q&A section of the event. Let's start off with the most important question of the night. And I'd like to direct this particular question to Susanna. What really is cloud engineering? What's the cloud industry all about? And how would you explain cloud engineering to someone that's never heard of it or does not study IT or engineering?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, cloud engineering means that your solution design doesn't start with the hardware constraints in mind or with how much hardware I need to buy to start with. As you can scale on demand and you can easily ramp up things because you can use multiple services to start deploying stuff and providing value. It also means that you have visibility and tooling to understand what's going on, as a cloud platforms provide you the way of scaling and interacting with your resources without having physical access to them. So you can know what's going on there. You have these operational parameters to understand, let's say, the machine without really being close to that. It also means losing part of the control that you had previously or that you can have with the hardware that you own. So you also need to be more explicit about the security and understanding the risk to make sure you don't put in risk your customers. So that's more or less what I would define.
Right, cool. That sounds exciting. Thanks, Susanna. Just to also follow up on that question, what got you interested into the field of cloud engineering? What do you love about it and what frustrates you?
So what I love it is to have this, the visibility. I would say, so I work in embedded systems, in bank systems and core network and all those things, and you always have the surprise from the customer setup. You prepare something and you can think of multiple cases, and then a customer configuration can bring everything down because you didn't think on that, and you need to react, and it's very reactive. So for me, the cloud provides you out of the box all those operational parameters that give you the clue to make things better, more efficient, more reliable, more performance, and it's kind of out of the box and affordable for everyone. So you don't need a massive development investment to do something and provide a service in the other side of the world. You can do it cheaply. That's for me the things that are attracting me on the cloud engineering. On the other side, this lack of control or the not having the 100% of the control, and then depending on the platform reliability, and there are things that are that you can feel a bit small on this big wall, and that's the part that frustrated me the most. That is how can I make sure the service is always up, and that I can influence what is the level of the service the platform provides me.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for that, Susanna. Next up, the next question I want to ask. So Alex, as a technical solutions engineer at Google, what does your average day look like? What are your day-to-day roles and responsibilities?
Yeah, sure. So I would sort of consider myself to be the glue between the customers, the products, and then I guess the documentation and tooling for the products themselves. My main focus is on the infrastructure-based products. So that has to do with virtual and physical computer infrastructure. I also do a lot to do with access and security. So there's also logging, monitoring, alerting, and reporting of any of the data or resources that you have. And then I also do a lot with a lot of the clients and tools that you use, and also APIs as well. So those who would like to call APIs directly. So generally, the thing I actually do every day is I unblock customer issues because they'll present whatever they have and whatever they're stuck on. Sometimes it's an idea, sometimes it's a production system which isn't perhaps working as they intend. And then with that, I need to diagnose and provide technical solutions to those. So that's sort of where my title comes in. So best understanding of exactly what the system is, what they're doing with it, where it may be broken and how we can get it fixed. With that as well, I recommend best practices. So generally it will be reliability, redundancy, and that sort of best effort. Also, I do a bit with incidents and outages, so actually handling those if they do come up. And then with all of this put together, I do try and recommend improvements to the products as well. So if there is something that's broken or something that isn't perhaps performing as we'd expect, contacting the correct teams who actually develop that if I can't look at developing that myself. And then also just improving our documentation, because you can never have documentation that isn't too detailed or that couldn't be written better. So sometimes I do that. And then also I actually do interviews for candidates who are applying for jobs as well. So that's sort of what my day-to-day job looks like.
Cool. Sounds great, Alex. Leading on from that, what's the general culture at Google and in your field as a technical solutions engineer?
Yeah, I'd say probably very social is the first thing that comes to mind. So my team actually has a 24 or an 8x5, or it's a 24x7 either way, video conference room that we just join, and we use that to discuss customer issues and solutions. Generally, the culture is very fun and vibrant. Everyone's working from home currently, but the video conference is sort of the way around that, which is we still manage to discuss and collaborate and solve things together. So yeah, that's probably a very high level overview.
Cool. Thank you for that, Alex. Now to the cloud industry itself. I'd like to ask you, Kieran, what are the different roles in the cloud industry? For example, what's the difference between cloud engineering and data engineering?
Well, cloud engineering, I guess, would be everything, the application essentially of software engineering principles to running workloads in the cloud, typically the public cloud, but not necessarily. For example, at IAG, we have our own private cloud running in OpenStack that allows us to deploy things there, but using the same principles that you would use containerization, etc., that you would do in the public cloud. So that's, I guess, the cloud engineering can think of all those patterns and practices that are required to safely execute those workloads in the public cloud. Data engineering is much more about how do you take data from many different sources across a very complex organization like IAG or Atlassian, or indeed Google might have thousands of sources of information. Pull that information in usually a raw form into a data lake or a data warehouse or a data mart, and then model it. So you provide transformations, typically in SQL, that defines meaning onto that. And then once you've done that and you've got a well-described set of data and it's clean and understandable and well-described, you can pass that off to data scientists and analysts and reporting users and dashboard users to consume that information and make decisions. So it's all about how do you take big pipelines of data, mash it all together like baking a cake, and then you eat your cake in the morning, usually after an overnight ETL run or something.
Right, cool. Thank you for that, Kieran. And following on from that, what skills and traits do you think are necessary to be able to succeed in this field? Are there any specific technical skills that would help within this field as well?
I think in the data engineering field, it's very, much more about things like Python and those sort of technical skills, Python, containerization using Kubernetes, and Docker, and obviously SQL. SQL is the sine qua non of data engineering and data in general. So how do you query data and understand it? So there's that aspect of it, but then there's also a very important piece, or two other very important pieces. The second piece is you really need to have a very clear and good understanding of the intent of the data. And so you need to understand the business domain and be able to use that to understand how can I make this raw, low value stream of information into something much richer and more ultimately profitable, but something that supports a business decision. So that's the second limb. And then the third limb is really understand, it's very important in a regulated industry like insurance, it is governance. How do I protect that data? Once I've got this data in this very rich and powerful form, how do I make sure that it's being used for the right purpose at the right time to make a decision? so it isn't being used for nefarious ends that might put our customers at risk.
Right, cool. Thank you for that, Kieran. And this is a question that I want to open up to any panelist. So you're welcome to jump onto this one. For related to the skills and traits, what kind of education, training, and qualifications does the cloud industry require? A lot of us are students still at uni. So how can we best upskill in the meantime?
I can maybe jump in with a perspective on that one. I guess something I found really useful, because when I sort of did my studies at uni, we didn't really learn much about cloud. Cloud was only just starting to emerge as a trend. But I found since then, the thing that really helped me grasp, because a lot of my role is it's at that governance, risk management layer, but we need to know the technical aspects. And what I found super useful for getting across that, and I think is really good for maybe students to experiment as well with, is some of the free courses that are available from the cloud providers. So I know like Microsoft and AWS both offer free courses online, and you get a little simulator instance. You can go and play around with it, play around with some of the technical services they offer. I found that really super useful just for my understanding, and practicing putting some workloads in the cloud, practicing with how do some of the different controls work, how do some of the different operational elements work. I think that's something that kind of anyone both in the industry or students at uni can take and apply and learn something really practical from.
Yeah, plus one.
Okay, sorry, you go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there are a number of free certifications you can do. Generally, like industry recognized certifications, of which there are quite a few, like CCNA, RCSA, ITIL are probably the first that come to mind. And then also, just getting your hands dirty by using it. And if you have a project, I'm sure you can build a project on the cloud, usually within free credits or free tier level of resources. And then I think any other thing I'd add on there as well is there's just so many technologies to learn. There's so many options out there. Like there's kind of so many ways you can implement something. And so if you actually look through the catalog of products and how they all work and the positives and negatives of each, you can probably better get to learn and understand them. And if you use them, then that's even better.
Cool.
Yeah, I was going to just add, I think it's really important to always, and I found this early in my career when I was transitioning from being a chemical engineer to computer science. And I effectively had to teach myself how to write software in Pascal and C and C# and C++ and all the different languages that have come along, and all the different technologies that are ever evolving, and they always change. But the one thing I really kept from my original engineering training in chemical engineering was really understanding how systems work. So it's all very well to understand one piece of the pie, but it's very important to keep in mind that it's all part of a big system, and you need to think about how the system works. And the second thing that I think is really useful to have is just having a bit of a spirit of tinkering and inquiry constantly. Don't be too afraid to break things, preferably in development, preferably not in production. But sometimes you will break things in production, and don't worry about that too much. Try not to do it very often, but often it's the things that you break and then have to go and fix that you really get that depth of learning and understanding of the technology.
Yeah, I totally align with that. I think that is crucial to practice, to learn, and also have, as Kieran said, this system, the understanding of the system end to end, and also understand how the things behave in production. Have a good understanding on what is the impact of the change, or why is this going up or going down. So Cloud provides a lot of visibility, as I said before, about these operational metrics. Understanding them well, those are your best friend, because it will tell you things about the next steps, about how to scale your systems, and are really, really powerful. So I highly recommend everything around DevOps as well, because when you design a system, it's not just working on my machine, let's say, right, working on this way. It's more so like how this gets deployed, what is the impact when it deploys, and how you manage the change.
Cool. Thank you for your insights on that. It was really, really great to hear. Next, I'd like to ask Andrew this particular question. What are some common or alternative paths to the cloud industry, especially considering your role at the moment?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can imagine there's many different ways. It's such a, like with any of the sort of new technologies, people sort of find themselves in it through a variety of paths. I guess I can speak to my path as being sort of starting out in sort of risk management. It was really heavy on risk management and audit. So that was what I did at Deloitte. I guess that's a bit of an alternate career because usually a lot of people, you start quite more at the technical end, and then as you progress through your career, you become, I guess, more generalist. You maybe start to do more management, team lead type roles and that kind of thing. I kind of went a little bit backwards in terms of I started with being quite generalist as an auditor. You kind of need to know a little bit about a lot, and then as I've gotten more experience, I've become more specialized. So I've become more specialized in doing specifically, technology risk management and cybersecurity, and then really focusing on certain technologies that I want to become sort of deeply specialized in. So getting to really know, for example, the Microsoft Azure stack, and getting to really know, certain elements of that, so that I can help clients when those opportunities come up. I'm really differentiate from, I guess, a lot of people in the risk and security space can be quite generalist. But I think it's important to have a little bit of knowledge about, they call it T-shaping, a little bit of knowledge about many things, but being really deeply specialized in a couple of important areas where you sort of set yourself out from the crowd. So that's definitely the approach I've taken in my career. Alex, you're going to jump in with something.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, we endorse the same principle, which is you're pretty much generalist in everything, but you're the go-to person for one or two specific things. And then if you have everyone on your team like that, then it's just a great way to work together, and you know who's the correct person to call out for what if you can't break down something. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think going into because I guess there's a lot of, when you look at, as a student, if I put myself back in those shoes, I had no idea what to expect going into a risk management role. And I was a little bit worried about, what would it be like, being an auditor. It's a big bad word, and being the scary auditor, I wasn't really sure what to expect. But I actually found that it was really good to learn that generalist skill set, because every single piece of work that I did, every different client I worked with, it was a completely different experience, learning something new about a different technology every time. So, within 5 years, I think I probably learned a lot more than if I'd gone directly into a specialist role to start with, and just deeply specialized from the start. So, definitely, I guess a different way than maybe what most sort of cloud engineers might go through, but it's also another path to think about.
Oh, thank you for that, Andrew. And to follow up on that, like from your perspective, what other related fields should students consider looking into if they're interested in cloud engineering? Are there sort of any majors within degrees that would complement cloud engineering?
Yeah, I think a big one could be cybersecurity. So something that I guess organizations have taken for granted with security is, you have your perimeter around you, and anything that's in that perimeter is, safe-ish. Whereas when you start putting things in the cloud, the focus becomes very different. It becomes, you're putting something out on, if it's public cloud, it's on public infrastructure. So security looks very different, particularly, between the different technologies. The security options and the security controls you can have in place vary a lot. I think it's something a lot of organizations struggle with. They maybe have a security team who have been specialized in on-premise security, and they're now starting to tackle cloud security, but they're finding it really hard to get the skills. And there's a big skill shortage, I think, in people who really understand security in the cloud. So yeah, I highly recommend, if students are passionate about cybersecurity and the cloud, combine those two together, because there's a really good opportunity there. And I think there's plenty of options, I think, at uni nowadays for majoring in cybersecurity or picking subjects that are really aligned to that view, and you can really complement those cloud skill sets with that. And it's not just, really understanding technical security, technical control specific in the cloud, but also just the security hygiene. If you're going to be doing, for example, just cloud engineering work, even if you're not specialized in security, really understanding security. Because I think, probably Susanna and Alexander can really speak to that, that, even if you're don't have security in your title, probably a lot of what you do in your role is about putting security controls in place.
Least privilege is generally the best idea as well.
Oh, oh yes. Sorry, go ahead, Susanna.
I just want to confirm that for priority security on reliability and performance, this is a cross thing, but security is usually number one.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you all for that. Next, I'd like to actually focus these set of questions on the future of cloud engineering and direct some of these questions to each of you. So the first one I'd like to direct towards Susanna. How has the field changed since you've started?
So yeah, I think that it's more on the thinking of from the, let's say, so initially when I was introduced to cloud engineering on my previous role, I think was more focused into saving some money. So it's like, instead of having your own hardware, you have this possibility of having this public cloud thing, so you can scale, you can be things on demand. So the kids kind of getting advantage of the very basic capabilities, let's say. So how I see the things evolving is towards more kind of customization and more kind of better customer experience regarding the service itself, right? So how can we make this faster for everyone, or how can we make sure that, I don't know, customers with a worse bandwidth can have as good service as others with better resources. So things like that, I think it's kind of moving towards more evolve and better customer experience, let's say.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for that, Susanna. Next, I'd like to ask you, Kieran, in your opinion, what will this field look like 10 years or so into the future?
Cloud engineering specifically?
Yeah, cloud engineering.
Yeah. Well, it's very hard to predict the future, obviously. It's very different to what I thought it was going to be 10 years ago. Maybe I'll answer it by answering a slightly different question, which is a bit cheeky, and say, what would I like it to look like in 10 years' time? I think from IAG's perspective, and the frustration that I have at the moment, is that working in a regulated environment, putting things in the public cloud, as we try to do with our friends at Google, is quite difficult, to be honest, because of the regulatory overhead and burden that sits on top of it. So I would really like to see what I would call the risk appetite of regulators and the risk appetite of our own company, our own cyber team, lift up to match reality. I think there's still a lot of fear in those spaces, and uncertainty and doubt. And I think over the next 10 years, hopefully not 10 years, maybe hopefully 6 months, breaking that down and getting people much more familiar, making it much more of a known quantity to regulators would be a huge benefit for us to move much more quickly. So I think it's less of the technical issue. It's more of a culture issue and a people issue for us at being able to take advantage of cloud.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for that, Kieran. So speaking of the future, from your perspective, Andrew, what is the next big thing that everyone should be looking at within this field, or cloud technology in general?
Next big thing. It's very hard to predict. I would say probably the biggest trend that I'm noticing is that, because I guess my exposure is more to larger clients. So I work with a lot of the big banks, the big insurers, and if I look at kind of the way it's playing out, the initial approach has been take what we've got in our on-premise data centers and shove it in the cloud as quickly and easily as we can, which typically means using like infrastructure as a service, using virtual machines, just popping it up in the cloud. That way we're getting out of the business of managing data centers. And then I think the next natural evolution of that is to move further up the tech stack and move towards platform as a service offerings. So really re-architecting applications away from things that just live in virtual machines that you still need to do a lot of patching and firewall rule management and all of that kind of stuff. Leaving that really with your cloud provider and moving up to app containers and using databases as a service and all of those different platform services, so that you're really abstracting the technical complexity of managing IT away from your internal company and letting the cloud provider do that. I think if your business isn't running infrastructure, then why manage that when there's probably someone better in terms of Google, Amazon, Microsoft. They can do that more efficiently and cheaper than you probably can in-house. So I think that's really the trend I'm seeing. And then coupled with that is when you're using those platform services, you get to take advantage of all the features that they can do faster centrally than if you try and do yourself. So think artificial intelligence, think predictive analytics, being able to take advantage of all those things and cloud services that talk to each other without you needing to build complex integration models and just using out of the box sort of APIs to integrate services. I think that's where I'm seeing it from a big picture sort of across bigger companies. Yeah, and I guess from a security and risk point of view, a lot more automation in the way that controls are managed, because with the cloud you have an advantage of being able to define what is your security controls and set it across all of your resources, report on it, and know exactly what your security posture is at any given time, which has been a lot more challenging in the past. So I think we'll see a lot more sort of automation, a lot more capability in that space as well going forward.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for that, Andrew. And finally, this question is directed towards Alex. If you could give any advice to those that are just starting to sort of dabble in this field or are interested in this field of cloud engineering, what would it be?
Just advice for people who are getting started. I'd say look to see all the options of which there are many. We have platform as a service infrastructure, you have data analytics, machine learning, networking. There's just so many options out there, really. Plus anything to do with containers. Kubernetes in itself is a beast. So you have just regular Kubernetes, and then you have like Anthos now, which is on-prem and multi-cloud. You also have Istio, which is basically like service-based security measures. You also have VPC service controls, which is sort of that, but at a service level. It goes so deep. So basically look to see what there is, see what piques your interest, and then just dive deeper and then get that T-shape that we were talking about earlier. Because it's good to be a generalist, but generally if you're hired as a professional, it's because you're a specialist in a certain area. So find whichever area works best for you and then become an expert at it.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks, Alex. Well, that's all for our members' questions. Now we'll get to answering the questions that you guys have asked throughout the panel in the chat. Feel free to drop any more questions that you have you want to ask in the chat box so that our panelists have the opportunity to answer them. So these questions, I'm just going to keep it open for any of you to answer. So one of our members, one of our viewers in the chat has just asked, I don't have any work experience in this area. How can I get into the playing field of the cloud industry?
I'm happy to start off. If you have a technology-based solution, chances are you can run it in the cloud. It's really not that difficult. If you need to have a database and you run it locally, you can always run that database in the cloud, and that's already an easy way. If it's a website, you can do the same. If it's a web-based technology solution, chances are you can containerize it. It's pretty easy as long as you know which options are out there.
Another thing that you could look at if you're technical, is just to go on, say, GitHub, right, and find an interesting open source project. You don't even need to contribute at first if you don't feel confident in doing that, but just have a look at the code and read the code and understand how they're doing things. I think that's really useful just to get it's really good to look at production code if you can read that. So do that, and then maybe contribute, even if it's just documentation or writing some test cases, or just start out doing that. That'll give you a lot of, it's very easy to do, it's free, it's publicly available, and it will get you into that community.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for answering that question. The next question is, what are the most needed certificates for a cloud engineer to have?
I'll just answer by saying I've never on a CV looked at people's certificates when I've hired them. I always look at what they do. It'd be much more impressive to me if they were an open source contributor, or if they, look at their work. I think is always for me. But, unless there's some real requirement for it, but generally, degrees are good though. So stay at uni and finish a degree.
Yeah, definitely, a base degree is always best. If there's stuff that you're not sure about and you're using the certificate to sort of learn things that you weren't sure out there, probably the building blocks of cloud, which is networking, web technologies, and then if you're going into the infrastructure area, then probably also Linux. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for answering that question as well. Next question that we have is, as stated before, you guys said that Google and AWS and Microsoft offer courses. Say if your background isn't in tech, do companies give you the opportunity to do these types of modules in the industry, like on the job?
I can speak for my company. We certainly do. Yeah, we offer our staff, basically they can do whatever training they like. They just talk about it with their coach. And if they're interested in getting into cloud, we absolutely, let them, block some time out in their calendar and do any of those free courses. You can also, at the end of the free course, I'm not sure about AWS and the Google ones, but I know with the Microsoft one, you just pay a small fee and you can do the actual exam and get the certification as well. Yeah,
cool. We invest in Atlassian. We invest heavily on learning and training. Although you can have background on IT, but there is always new things popping up, and technologies and cloud is also evolving a lot. So yeah, definitely we have programs internally for that.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for that as well. And another question that we have received from our chat is, and this is once again an open one, is what have been some mind-blowing or amazing moments that you have come across when working on cloud technologies or projects?
I've got one, if no one else does. When I was at TripAdvisor, I started working at TripAdvisor, and they had a very large database running in SQL Server that was serving data warehouse queries. And it was painful to use, and the analysts would try to query it, and it'd be like 35, they could run a query and it'd take 35 minutes to return, and sometimes it wouldn't. So they'd have a thought and they'd try and experiment and run their query and go off and have a cup of tea and chat to their friend and come back, and the query was finished. And like, what was I doing again? I can't even remember. Rinse, repeat, right? So then I was like, oh, here's a free ad here for Google, by the way. BigQuery had come out in beta, and I managed to get on the beta program. I just took literally a copy of this entire data set and put it in BigQuery, and I ran the same query that took 35 minutes, and it came back in 7 seconds. I was like, that's witchcraft. Like, how can they do that? That is impossible. Like, everything I know about databases, I've been doing this for 25 years, has just been completely invalidated. So that was for me the big what moment, and that really when I got the power of the cloud.
Yeah, for me it was working in my previous company. It was a social network in Spain, and I remember once like having a alerting because there was a problem in deployment going on, and suddenly having tweets across everywhere like, the site was suddenly translated to the default language that was English. It was in Spain. So it was like a matter of like minutes to join the dots between this error that we were seeing here and the impact and rolling back, and was super fast. It was like, oh my God, this is that's amazing. Because of the speed and the capacity you have for rollback super quickly, so you don't need to distribute the software everywhere in a very slow way. And also because of the visibility of the problem itself. For me, it was like,
Yeah, cool. Andrew?
Yeah, I was going to say I can speak to one that it's probably it's less about what the cloud can do, but more about what a client was planning to do with the cloud, which blew my mind. So one of my banking clients, they wanted to move their the infrastructure supporting their mobile app into the cloud. Very important, obviously, mobile app. It's a high number of usage. You know, customers log in multiple times a week. It's got to be highly available, highly secure, and so to get around the risk of what if one of their cloud providers, so they were using Azure, what if Azure went down? How are we going to service our customers? How are we going to make the app run? And their approach was, when I was doing the risk assessment, you know, documenting all of their approach to the different risks, their approach was, oh, that's okay. We've actually architected it so it also works in AWS. We've stood up all the AWS infrastructure. And if Azure was to go down, we can immediately flick over to AWS and run it from that. So they're concurrently running their app basically out of both cloud providers, which I thought was pretty mind-blowing, because I hadn't seen that before. I'd definitely seen an approach where, you know, they might be able to shut one down and migrate it over to the other cloud, but to actually be running it out of both clouds, you know, and be able to flick between it in a live mode was pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Yeah, and for the next question, sort of like the big three cloud providers, what is the difference between Google Cloud, AWS, and Microsoft Azure?
I guess I'll take this one first. Fundamentally, they're all the same thing. Some of them may be slightly cheaper in one area. Some of them will have different features in other areas. Generally, you can get the same thing you want to get done in all of them in their own certain way. They definitely each have their own flavor in different categories. But yeah, fundamentally at the core, it's all cloud computing. It's all the same technologies. I wouldn't really differentiate them all too much.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Thank you for that answer, Alex. Next, what are some junior projects for what are some projects for junior engineers wanting to pursue cloud engineering as a career? Any sort of like examples that you've seen in the past?
I mean, I was just going to say, from a security point of view, I'm not sure about junior projects, but I mean, a way to, I guess, if you're interested in security in cloud, a way to sort of put that to use is, I don't know how familiar people are with bug bounties, but you have, you know, online sort of databases companies subscribe to, and they basically let you try and find holes in their product, and if you find one, you get rewarded. So a lot of people like to do that to test out their security skills and get rewarded at the same time, which you can kind of do from anywhere, and you can do without any kind of, you know, qualification. You don't need to do it, you know, as an employee. You're just freelancing. So you know, that's one option, similar to the sort of open source contribution piece that Kieran mentioned before. It's, I guess, another way to get some skills and put skills to use, you know, kind of, you know, no commitment way.
Another one is Kaggle. I don't know if everyone knows Kaggle. They have lots of competitions for data science, which are with large data sets. So you can do those and play around with those. And I think that's quite an interesting one to get into as well. And kind of, you could use that then to start to take advantage of some cloud tooling to help you try and win a Kaggle comp.
Yeah, I would also say that build something from scratch. Start thinking on solving a specific problem. It doesn't need to be super innovative. Maybe there's something that other application does, but try to build it from scratch. I think that is gives you also the visibility of where are the challenges, what are the things that you don't know, right? So build something simple, try to deploy that in cloud, try to have continuous integration at the test, deployment, do some automations, and start digging into that direction. You're going to have a good overview of the general approach of the thing.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for this. Thank you for those insights. The next question is from another one of our members in the chat. The question is, I don't have experience and internships. I don't have experience and internships have rejected me because I have no experience. What are some tips that you can give to help boost my chances, especially during COVID-19, as it is quite scarce for comp sci and engineering internships?
So I think internships are quite interesting. So try to ask what is the level of experience they will require. So try to get some feedback from this projection and start building some pet projects, start building your portfolio a bit, and keep trying. I think that there is a matter of finding also the right place to give you the opportunity. So try to get feedback, and even then, like, what are the skills they say, like, for you to apply. I can tell you, like, there are usually multiple internships happening during the year. So keep trying, ask for feedback, and demonstrate that you learn.
Yeah, and also maybe don't necessarily be put off by a rejection. We, for example, at IAG, we have a formal internship program that's run by our HR division, People and Culture. But then there are other ones that are a little bit informal. So then there's Code Like a Girl, for example. And then we have, I run my own one where I literally just walked into the UTS campus and put a piece of paper up on the wall and said, here's my mobile number, call me if you want an internship. So sometimes that can happen as well. So, there's lots of different avenues. And so just try and be a little bit creative in breaking the door down.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of options. Like, you have your own personal projects, if you can document those and show evidence there, open source projects on GitHub, hackathons and other events like that. There's a lot of ways to develop and show skills, and you'll be surprised how quickly you can learn.
Yeah, and I think also making a bit of a showcase on, say, LinkedIn or something. I know it's a popular platform. A lot of employers, and you can go on there and really see what industry trends are, comment on people's posts, and just have a bit of a conversation and start building a network through that, which can really help as well.
Yeah, and one of the things I do is go to industry events like data engineering meetups, and you can find them on meetup.com, right? And you can monitor that if you want. And actually, a lot of people go there to recruit people. So if you just turn up and start talking to people, you'll start to build your network. And particularly in Sydney's business culture, I found that it's really very network based, the way people are hired and the way they move between companies. So making those connections and building your network is really important.
Cool. Thank you all for those answers. The next question that we have from our audience is, can you each describe a particular struggle you faced when entering the industry and how you managed to overcome them?
I can start with that, related to the previous one. So I found hard my first steps on the industry. It was hard for me to find my first job. I was studying telecommunication engineering, but I said the computer science branch. And it was, I think that until I got my first job in IT, I have very different jobs. I couldn't find the right place for me to give me the first opportunity. Then things were a bit easier, not super easy, but a bit easier. So what I learned from that is keep trying. keep trying different options, different alternatives. Think a bit out of the box. Maybe not applying to the right one. Let's try to apply to this other one. So evaluate different options and don't be scared of like failing and trying again and again until you find as well what you like. Because for instance, I tried different things. I started as a system administrator, I've been a developer, I've been QA, I've been product manager. So, and each of those experiences give me a point of view of this world that lead me to know now what I want and what is the kind of things I want to do and what I want to do next.
Yeah,
a bit of an unusual. I went from chemical engineering to working in a call center where I was working a part-time job at the time, and they just said, "Oh, do you know anything about computers?" And I said, "Yeah, I've programmed my own PC at home." And they said, "Great, you've got a job in the IT department." And then I had to figure out how to write software. So I had a bit of I got the job before I had the skills, which was a bit backwards, but you know, that's kind of how it worked back in those days.
Something that I sort of, well, I guess the question was, what did I struggle with, I suppose, or so when I initially joined the cloud industry, I was very comfortable and familiar with conventional computing technologies. And then I don't want to say I got caught up, but the whole sort of cloud perspective was something that I wasn't very familiar with. It was very unknown and very buzzwordy. But then actually getting into it, it's not too far off conventional computing. It's just additional layers, and then everything is more interconnected through web technologies. So I was a little bit caught up in the buzz, but after I actually got familiar with it, it's not actually all too different from conventional computing. So actually one project that I started off with was I made a fridge, and the fridge had two sensors at the bottom, because I guess the people at work, they were very interested in sort of, anyway. So we had the fridge and had the two sensors at the bottom to measure the weight of some kegs, and also the temperature. And then I just plugged a whole lot of cloud services together like Lego. And I got the device reporting to the cloud using IoT. That went into a data set, which then got queried by a backend, and then that rendered a front end, which was a Raspberry Pi that was actually attached to the physical fridge itself. So by just collecting a whole bunch of cloud technologies and sticking them together like Legos, it sort of broke down a lot of those walls for me. And I learned quite a lot, and I got myself out of that groove.
I can give an example as well from a few years ago. I landed myself at a client where I was sort of what you call seconded to the team. Like I was putting this team, and they didn't really have any induction processes. There was no kind of, you know, this is the way that we do things, and here's the templates and the, you know, processes to follow and whatever. It was just like, okay, go forth and conquer. And it was doing a kind of a role that I hadn't really done before. So I guess it's quite similar to what you probably find yourself in maybe in internships and things like that. And so I guess this advice also applies to those kind of situations too. What I found worked really well was that just asking the people around me and taking them out for coffee, getting to know them, and asking just to shadow them actually. So it felt a bit weird as someone who's supposed to be, you know, the consultant who knows things, who comes in and gets things done, to then go, okay, well, no, actually, I want to spend, you know, a week shadowing you and watching how you do it, so then I can go and pick it up. Worked really well, and that is also actually quite similar to what I did back when I was at uni and did internships. So taking those opportunities to really shadow, to take people out for coffee or virtual coffee, I guess these days, get to know them and really understand, I guess, the way that they see the role and what things they're doing, because you can have, you know, several people doing the same role, and each of them have a very different perspective on how it fits into the bigger picture and why they do what they do. So helping understand that from different people can help you, I guess, you know, do what you got to do easier. So yeah, some practical advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and time for the next question from our chat. So this one is, how are organizations approaching data sovereignty, specifically the various legal obligations that large cloud vendors have in potentially providing backdoors into their platforms to law enforcement agencies?
I can give maybe one perspective on this. So working mostly with, and probably Kieran will be pretty familiar with some of this as well, being in financial services. I mentioned before I do a lot of work with financial services, and data sovereignty is a big consideration. If you're putting things in the cloud that is, production workloads, customer data, you pretty much, you got to go onshore, or if you're going offshore, you've got to have some really good justification as to, what are the risks and what are the controls you put in place for that. So I know that there's a big, most of the clients I work for will do everything they can to stay onshore wherever possible. So any of the, Google, Amazon, Microsoft really picking the regions that are local and deploying to there. And if that's not possible, then really considering what is the legal environment that cloud providers working in. I think with a lot of SaaS providers especially, it's not always transparent where your data is actually hosted. So it's really important when you're signing up to those services to look at the contracts, to ask the right questions, to really understand where is my data being held, what control do I have over where it's held. And I know that what I've seen with bigger clients is if they want to use a cloud solution that hasn't been deployed in Australia yet, if they're big enough, they can even influence the cloud provider, if it's a software as a service provider, to actually move create a workload in the Australia region to meet their data sovereignty requirements. So, yeah, I think the bigger the company, the more bargaining position you've got to be able to do something like that. But I know that's something that a lot of, even outside of financial services, people are taking very seriously.
Yeah, I actually I worked on this today, of all things. I work on a number of products, but one of the things that I came across today was location restricted storage. So basically, where the data is stored at rest, and we actually have a organization policy, is what we call it, which is set at either a organization level. So basically, any resource that ends in your company's domain that is attached to Google Cloud. And then you can set a location restriction on that. So it's compatible with a number of products. So let's say Google Cloud Storage or BigQuery. And then if you have that constraint set to either a whole region or a whole country or a whole zone, so like even a specific location, then you can actually have that data stored at rest in that location.
Yeah, I think, the reality is for us as a company, for a Google or an Amazon, or if data leaked from them, the reputational impact on the company would be enormous. So they've got huge incentives to not let the data leak. That's the first bit. And the second bit, you were talking about backdoors. The reality is probably, yeah, if the federal government issued a subpoena to Google and said, we want access to some data, they probably would have to do that, or if the US government said that. But everyone would be very reluctant. I think that would be the absolute last option for a government to do that. And B, they can do it anyway. Like if the US government and Australia have a treaty, and the US government, if it really wanted something, could ask the Australian government, and they can get it from your own data center if they really wanted to. So that, there's that sovereignty issue. So I think it comes down to building a really good commercial relationship with a cloud provider based on trust and openness and accountability. If you can do that, then I think that mitigates the risk.
There's also another option, which is when data is stored. Well, data is generally encrypted when it's stored at rest, so that should be what the default is, and that's what everyone should be doing. But you can also supply your own encryption keys with Google Cloud. So even if Google Cloud holds your data, it's encrypted with your key that you have, and if you lose that key, then no one can get access to that again. So that's another part to add to that.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for that answer. The next question is actually directed towards Susanna. So as a female in STEM, was there any stereotypes and stigma towards you or females in general within the cloud field? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I don't see the cloud field particularly different to the IT field on that regard. So I think that they, as part of an underrepresented group, there is always bias because there is not a lot of role models of female or as I said, from other underrepresented groups as well. So you can find bias sometimes in terms of barriers for entry in a specific company or like in the day-to-day evaluation. This is something that happens in the day-to-day. And there are places where the bias is not acknowledged and there is no training about that and the managers are not trained. So it's very hard to overcome that. So I think things are changing a lot because we have also, as I said, like we are more aware of those things now. And I think it's a matter of finding the place and the company that really push for that, for acknowledging bias, for training people and for have a bit more evaluation of the merits instead of I thought that you were not technical enough or you were not commit enough or, those kind of things that can happen when there is not a lot of reference. So to answer your questions, yes, there is some stereotypes in general in the IT and the IT industry, not only for being female, there is other people in the underrepresented groups. And then it's a matter of like training yourself and training others and finding a place that embrace the difference and push for the diversity and inclusion. That is where we are moving to.
Thank you for that insight, Susanna. And the next question that we have is actually directed towards all panelists. Even though many industries and businesses are still in the process of migrating to cloud-based solutions or optimizing their cloud experience, what do you think is the next big thing? What's beyond the cloud?
So yeah, I don't know if the next big thing, but something I'm really passionate about is about the being anywhere and basically like having this ability of, as I say before, like customize things for the based on the resources the customer has and be able to provide services with different capabilities depending on where you are, what is the capacity you have in your, if you have broadband, if you don't, and to move the service with you around the globe, right? This is something that I see very, very powerful in cloud, and we have the things almost there. So it's a matter of like designing things in the right way. This for me, the next big thing is more about the customer experience on that regards and how we can optimize for having a good performance, reliability, and good kind of user experience using more heavily the cloud services.
Yeah, thank you for that as well. The next question that we have is, are there any internship programs that are offered to university students in your company that may be open for applications now or later in the year?
Yes. We do internships at Google twice a year. I believe it's in around January, and the other one is also about 6 months later. I don't know exactly when the dates are, but I can definitely follow up with that for you if you like. Alternatively, I'm sure you can relatively easily find them online.
Yeah, I can say that in Atlassian we also offer internships. Yeah, I would be happy of giving a bit more information about that. There is something in the in our space, but yeah, can contact me and I can give you a bit more insights on that.
Yeah, we have multiple programs.
Cool.
Yeah. Likewise at Amstelveen too. We're in the process of trying to formalize what our internship approach looks like. We're quite small, we're only 12 people, but we have taken interns in the past, and we've taken a grad this year. We take a grad next year, So yeah, we'll probably hear more from us on that.
Sounds great. Okay, thank you. Next question is, with cloud engineering, is there a massive focus on encryption and not on data analytics / acquisition?
Sorry, could you repeat that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, with cloud engineering, is there a massive focus on cloud engineering? Massive focus on encryption, security, and not data analytics or acquisition?
Maybe I can talk about from a data engineering perspective. So from a data engineering, everything's security is obviously incredibly important. Security is and governance are effectively the brakes that allow you to go fast, right? If you don't have those two things, then you're not going to get a ticket to ride in the cloud. So you've got to nail those. They're like the hygiene factors. Once you've done that, then I guess you could think for most organizations now, and certainly for an insurance company, this has always been the case, data is really, really important and becoming absolutely central to everything that's happening in every organization now. So the acquisition of data, management of data, the governance of the data, the securing of the data, the activation of it is now critical to support any business decision and strategy, and also to serve customers in real time. It used to be not until very recently, data engineering was called reporting, and was pretty much, you made a database and you had a Cognos report that someone would watch, and maybe they'd make a decision on it, or usually they'd just make a decision on their experience and their sort of gut feel. And I think the corporate culture of every large company now has moved beyond that. So now you really need to justify decisions that you make with data. And that means it's absolutely central now. And as digital transformations happened, that means that the quality of that data now directly affects customers and what they buy. So data is absolutely critical, but you have to have that security upfront baked in, otherwise you can't do it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So I sort of think of both of them as separate things, but foremost is security, and make sure it's encrypted during transport and at rest, and make sure that only certain people have access to it. And those people who do have access is the principle of least privilege. So there's no super user admin accounts that have access to everything and use that for your daily job. It's see if you can use a specific Surface account to do that at a certain time with a limited scope, because you definitely want to limit the scope and have security as a front and foremost.
Yeah, I would say that also, like, if you look at for instance, the GDPR and how they define the data, you will find that there is user-generated content or private information, and then there is another bunch of data as well. So I think it is worth it to identify what is the category of this data. So first you categorize, and depending on the category, you will see like, this is a private data, this should be encrypted, not accessible by anyone. So this data is anonymous, and it's about the operation, it's about the usage, and it's totally anonymous. So then it will have different levels of security.
And something that goes kind of hand in hand with that, I think, and cuts across both, is privacy. Really making sure that you're collecting the data for the intent that the person consented to, that you're using it in the way that it was consented to, and that you're applying the appropriate security over it, so that it doesn't get into the wrong hands. It kind of cuts across both, I guess, the security aspects and the data, and how the business intend to use that data. You can find plenty of examples of companies who've decided they had, marketing thought, we have this great data set we can use from all our customers. Let's go do some campaigns off it, and then being slapped with fines and publicity because they've essentially spammed people. So yeah, very important. When I guess that's not really just about cloud, but it's especially important with cloud, and when we're talking about big data and how we use that, as to what the privacy implications are.
I also have 4 more letters to add to that: GDPR, which is not only that, but also getting rid of the data and retention of data as well.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And the next question that we have from one of our members in the chat is, do you have to be a coding genius to pursue a cloud career? I love my IT degree, but coding isn't my strong suit.
So I will take that one. So in general, for careers in IT, my strong recommendation is do something you love, because it doesn't work well at the first try, and you will need to persist a lot. So do something that that you love. You don't need to be a code genius. It's something you want to get more in the systems, the operational side, or like try to find what really motivates and passionates, and you find your passion there, and then you go full in. This would be my recommendation. So don't need to be a genius on anyone and on anything, let's say, but passion about something. Yes.
And I think a lot of people get a bit discouraged sometimes by arbitrary internet tests where they ask you to do something like, read balance of red-black tree from memory without looking at Google, that are completely not what actually happens in the industry. So when you say you're not good at coding, maybe you're not good at that kind of coding, which actually you don't need to do at all. So don't worry about that. It's more about, a lot of it's about scripting. Like, I've got to take some data over there and put it there, and it's, make sure it gets there. That's not very, you don't need to be, you don't need to code neural networks every day or genetic algorithms or simulated annealing, all that kind of stuff. Often it's just a loop with, an if condition. If you can do that, then you're a coder, right? And then, then you can take it from there in any direction you want. No, but I totally agree with Susanna. It's about passion. If you're interested in it, you'll be good at it.
And I mean, just to add an example of where you can be really involved in cloud, but not necessarily be a programmer. One of the kind of really hit cloud applications that's becoming quite popular is Servicenow. I've been doing a bit of work with Servicenow the last sort of year and a half. I think it's quite kind of epitomizes where the cloud is going in a certain way, because it's a platform as a service or application as a service. I'm not exactly sure what the classification is, but you as a someone who's implementing it for a client, you don't necessarily need to be able to code. It's all about configure the solution to meet their needs. It's highly configurable. It's still cloud. You still need to know a little bit about cloud, and you still need to have some basic engineering principles and be able to manage a software project and collect requirements and test the system and do all of that sort of thing. But you can actually do all of that without writing any code. And I think that's sort of going back to my point before around further abstracting away from the technical aspects of systems. That's probably a prime example of how that's playing out.
Oh yeah, that's reassuring. Yeah. So the next question that we have from our members is in regards to working overseas. Maybe it's not really like possible right now because of COVID, but has your current position or any previous positions you've had in the industry of cloud engineering allowed you to work overseas?
Yes, definitely. So I've worked in, and before cloud engineering, which I think Susanna said is just another kind of IT, right? It's just you're just running IT on someone else's computer, basically. But I've worked in London, and I'll tell you a story. I went to London for 4 weeks to go traveling in Spain with my cousin who's an architect. And I was there for 2 days, and it was just before the Y2K thing blew up and software engineers were rare as hen's teeth. So I was just in a pub and this guy said, "Oh, can you write software?" And he said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Okay, just go traveling with your cousin and come back and I'll have a visa for you, set up and a job." And so I ended up staying there for 5 years. So, it definitely can take you all around the world. And I've worked in Boston, TripAdvisor, and San Francisco, and yeah, it's definitely a ticket for travel if you want to.
I've visited overseas, probably primarily the US because it's a US-based company, but I also have partner teams globally because we're definitely a global company. So I've got to visit like Japan and India, as well as incidental trip to the UK and France as well.
And I can also say from a, when you get involved in risk management, one of the things you often have to do is site visits to go check that controls are in place, and to talk to teams and make sure that, you know, they're also got the right risk management controls in place as well. So that in the past has meant I've, you know, been to Singapore and New Zealand and different client sites all over Australia. Some of my colleagues have done some data center site visits, you know, in the US and UK and that kind of thing. So yeah, plenty of those are more like short stints, you know, go overseas for a week or two to do a review. So yeah, plenty of travel.
Yeah, to offer other point of view, for instance, I can tell, like, in the past I used to travel a lot. Now also I decided to stop traveling, or like limit the traveling thinking, and also I'm kind of happy that with my work I can also like not travel a lot, because with all the technology in place and the being able to work remotely or collaborate remotely with my colleagues is not a super hard is not a super hard requirement right now. So on the other hand, I think this working on IT gives you this opportunity as well.
I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens after COVID, because I think COVID's driving a lot of changes in a lot of organizations. And I think a lot of organizations who used to think that you had to be there are now really reevaluating that. And so it may be that in the future, it might be the reverse, where previously it was a license to travel overseas. It might be more that it's a license to work for any company anywhere in the world, because you can, in principle, there's nothing to stop you from working for a company in Iceland. If you're just cutting code, you don't need to be, you can be anywhere.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that. The next question we have is, when using the cloud, is what gets stored in the cloud easily accessible in person? Like, for example, server warehouses, are they easily accessible in person?
I guess I can talk to having been to a cloud data center. It is not easy. It's very well protected, to the extent where, you know, you even have in some of the more advanced data centers, and I'm assuming this is where the question was getting to, but where if you go inside the actual part of the data center where the, you know, servers and storage racks and everything are, on entering they weigh you, and on leaving they weigh you, to make sure that you're not leaving with anything from the data center, and that you aren't sneaking in somebody else into the data center. And, you know, obviously combining that with biometrics like face scans, handprints, all that sort of stuff. So any of the things you've seen in spy movies, half of that stuff is in a lot of these data centers.
Yeah, I've been to a few data centers in my career, and if you can't just walk into one, there is any number of biometrics and any number of approvals. They have to confirm your identity with government ID. You can't just have like your student card, passport, or driver's license only. There's actually a video for the Google data centers about all their different levels of security and the way that they implemented there. I'd recommend you watch that video. It's very interesting. But no, it's like military level.
They even have attack dogs sometimes.
And following on from that, just a question in the chat we have is, have you ever been lost in a data warehouse?
Generally, if you're inside one, you either know where to go or you're with someone who knows where to go. But they generally have maps because they can be quite enormous. Yeah, think several football field sizes in some cases. Yeah, but you know, the key fundamental is that there's a lot of labeling on everything. So different storage cages are labeled, and within that you've got racks that are labeled, and then the actual individual servers and things are labeled. All the cables are labeled, so it's supposed to be quite clear how where everything is and how it all fits together. So and there's maps, you know, that cover all of that stuff. So personally, I haven't been lost in a data center.
Yeah. All right, cool. And onto our final question to wrap everything up. for each of you, this question applies to each of you, sorry. Other than having a passion for computer science and cloud, what other interests do you have outside of tech?
Fishing.
I've always had a fascination for electronics. So before I started working in IT, I was doing retail at an electronics store, JCar, before I actually started working full-time in IT. And I like making things. So like the thing behind me, I made that. So yeah, that's definitely my passion.
Nice. Yep.
Yeah.
Susanna, did you?
So, yeah, apart from IT, so I like to also build things at home, but also I like to draw and do a bit of random drawing. And yeah, not just for myself. I used to paint in the past a bit more openly. Now it's more for myself, but I find this very relaxing, focusing something small in a paper.
And like Susanna, I've got a bit of a creative thing going outside of work. So into music, I'm a piano keyboard player. So until a couple of years ago, I was in a band. So I got to go overseas and do some gigs, and did some gigs locally as well, of course. So that's my out of work kind of release.
Nice, yeah. And Kieran, I think you wanted to say something?
I was just going to say, I think there may be a theme there of people who work in technology typically have something else in their life that's not geeky. It'll be drawing or painting or dancing or something. But I think it's quite good to have balance in your life like that. So, as a bit of career advice, it's good to have something, just to rest your brain when you've been focusing on code all day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially something that doesn't involve a screen.
Yeah, exactly.
All right then. Thank you all for answering those questions. I think that's all the questions that we can answer from our members. So that concludes our event for tonight. On behalf of UTS Tech Society, I'd like to give a massive thanks to our panelists, Andrew, Alex, Susanna, and Kieran. And thank you for taking the time out of your evening to join us. We really appreciate it. I can say for sure that we've learned so much more about the cloud industry after tonight. We also would like to thank all the members for attending to learn more about cloud engineering. It was great seeing many of you asking questions. Especially during this pandemic, seeing you guys online and interacting with us is amazing. We all hope your studies are going well, and we know it's week 6 now, so things are ramping up, so good luck. If you guys are interested in any of our other events, go ahead and check out our Facebook page to see what's coming up.